On Rethink Real Estate today, I take you through the perspective of interest, and the volume of it does not define an auction campaign. And I'm going to talk to you about the leverage that it gives you in a low interest process and a low interest campaign when a property is on the marketplace. Talk a little bit about traditional and how we can identify individual sellers that either want to sell or they need to sell in a very quicker time frame. And in most of the marketplaces at the moment, identifying the want versus need, because at the moment, I think you need to focus on the people that need versus the people that want, and realizing a bad investment of your time. I talk about the comparison to the S&P 500 index, that if you looked at it over a 10-year cycle, how it's up and to the right. But if you zoom in, there is turbulence all the time. And I think we're in the down part of that turbulence at the moment. Hopefully you enjoy. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Well, back with the practical session from me. I haven't done one in this season, I don't think. But the real topic of today is going to be interest does not define the success of selling a property. So one of the things, I was filming a video the other day for our agents that are doing auction. One of the things with our white label process is, if they haven't done an auction before, is that we've got to obviously educate them as we go and trying to give them as much information as possible. And one of the things that most people are struggling with the most is that if a property goes on the marketplace, like I have a situation at the moment with a property, it's in Colorado. We did $1 million price reduction. The agent hasn't got one phone call on it. $1 million price reduction was previously on the market at $3,995,000. We dropped it to $3 million. So as you can appreciate, is that situation is going to be quite glim when it comes to volume of people through the front door. Now, at that point, the agent is obviously a pretty established agent locally. They get it. And I'm quite lucky in that situation. But 9 times out of 10, the agent will just go into a complete panic and a tailspin. And it's the same that I've seen in the traditional transactions when we're involved in them and we go into them later, is that the agent just doesn't have anything to talk about when the property doesn't have the volume of activity. And this is one of the things that I just want to make sure of, is that this bit of information from a practical standpoint is working on your mindset from the way that you approach the situation if you don't have much interest. Guys, you've got to use that from the perspective of, first and foremost, if there isn't much interest and you've done $1 million price reduction on the property and taken it to a bidding to start from, what do you do next? You use that to educate the seller on the marketplace, and you realize what the level of motivation there is from the seller. So an example of a call that I just got off of that Colorado property, we sat down with the sellers on a Zoom call and went, guys, we did $1 million price reduction, haven't had a single phone call. They're like, wow, well, we are really going to have to adjust our expectations then. We figured out very quickly they're building elsewhere. There is a motivation. The biggest concern that they have is about underselling the property and affecting the neighborhood because they're building in the same neighborhood. And the thing that I said to them is that, guys, I really appreciate the fact that you're worried about what you sell it for from a future outcome for yourself and your neighbors. But realistically, I need you to understand is that in your marketplace right now, okay, is that it's not about you protecting the market, because it just takes one other person to be in a situation that's less fortunate than yours financially, and they choose to set a new market by accepting something much lower, and then you're affected on both of your properties. So in that situation, we use the lack of interest in order to educate the seller. Now, that being said, is that we've got to understand why we still do an auction. This was my conversation to them, is that, well, why are we still going with auction? Why are we still leading into an auction date? Because all it takes is one person. One person being interested, doesn't know that they're the only person interested, that then walks in the door. They have a perception that a live auction is happening, and you get to play the negotiation card of that, hey, we do need something quite solid if we are going to stop the auction. Whereas traditionally, if that home had been on the marketplace like it had been for about 4 months with absolutely no interest whatsoever, someone walks in. And I was dealing with another situation, funnily enough, another one in Denver. This one's a little outside of Denver that I'm referring to, Raphael Street, but then the other one's a little closer to Denver. Like, oh, we've had a buyer floating around for the last 2 weeks. What type of negotiation do you think it's going to be when a buyer has been floating around thinking about executing and the property has still been on the marketplace? And I didn't say it as directly to the agent when we're pitching the process. It was sort of like, guys, you need to convert it to auction. They said to me, they accused me of saying, well, you just want an easy sale. I'm like, no, I'm trying to help you here, because the reality is you convert that through to auction and you let them know that, no, now we're going to auction. Now we're dropping the bidding to start from to X. Yes, you might hurt the negotiation in the very beginning from a price perspective, but all of a sudden you've regained the leverage from a negotiation standpoint, rather than them taking 2 weeks to make a decision. And then when they finally do, know that they're in complete control, so that then the first initial offer is X. And when you come back with a counter offer, that then they don't even respond to that price point, because they then know that you are the only person that they are negotiating with. Interest does not define the success of a campaign. Interest does not define the success of auction. The one thing that I need you to understand is that even in a traditional real estate sense, is that you have the opportunity to take the quote unquote level of interest that you have and use it either to educate your client, but then also use it as an opportunity to actually refine your skill sets of negotiation within lower interest properties. I think that's something that we are all going to face as we move through the next coming months, as interest rates have not dropped to the level that we want them to. There's definitely a few select properties that have more interest than others in particular price points, but there are major marketplaces here, like the Florida market, the Colorado market, the Texas marketplace, the Tennessee marketplace, that are definitely widely affected, and they are just not moving at this point. So we have to lean in to the nature of less volume. Okay. Now, auction will help you in the leverage standpoint that regardless of the volume of people that come through, even if you only have one person, they have no idea that they're the only person interested. That is what the purpose of auction is in a low volume showing marketplace. And so many agents have been so used to volume of showings for so long, they've forgotten how to have a conversation with a seller that says, sorry, guys, we just don't have anyone that's interested in the property at this point. And they think that they need to come with this elaborate tap dance of next. Okay. It's use it from an educational perspective to understand their motivation. Have a conversation with them about possibly using auction if they are still motivated to sell, to continue to keep the leverage, or a price reduction. Now, if there is not a motivation and there is clearly not a need to move, it's more of a want, make sure that you value your time. Make sure that you understand a bad investment of your time. And that is part of our process at the moment, is that I would say in excess of 50% of listings within the first 2 weeks, we're evaluating those, even though they've been on the marketplace in many cases for months and weeks. The agent hasn't gotten the clarity needed, that ultimately we've dropped the price, the market still hasn't been there. Now is not the time for them to invest into the property if ultimately the seller doesn't have a need to sell and it's more of a want. Evaluating a bad investment of time quickly is the other motive fact that you need to take into understanding. And most of the time, that price reduction from a bidding to start from perspective that is drastic will give you a gauge of the market. The final thing that I want to leave you with is think about the S&P 500. If you were to take it and look at it over 10 years, it is just a straight line of up and to the right. But if you zoom in on individual moments of time, there are very big downs and there are very big ups. The closer you get into the timing of the marketplace or the timing of that chart, you get to see the discrepancy up and down. In many of those marketplaces, it's whether or not the seller wants to wait for the up or whether or not they can wait for the up. But it's also you and your time of whether or not you can continue the process of making sure that you're delivering the information, whether that's bad information, whether that's just no information at all, on a consistent basis. And what I'm saying to people at the moment is that there is no doubt that we are zoomed in on the marketplace at the moment, and it is a dip. There is no doubt that there is a dip. Will it come back up again? Absolutely. And I believe it will be sooner rather than later. It's just a matter of that we have to wait it out. And if they can, realize a bad investment of your time, maintain the relationship with them, and bring it back to marketplace at another time. Want versus need is another opportunity that you have to understand in a shorter period of time. Hopefully that perspective helps. A little bit all over the place. But that being said, remember, interest doesn't define the success of an auction campaign because all you need is one buyer because they have a perception of competition leading into the live auction itself. Traditional doesn't have that. So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.